Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl was a British novelist, short story writer, poet, screenwriter and fighter pilot. His books have sold more than 250 million copies worldwide. Born in Wales to Norwegian parents, Dahl served in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War, in which he became a flying ace and intelligence officer, rising to the rank of acting wing commander. He rose to prominence in the 1940s with works for both children and adults, and he became one of the world's best-selling authors. He has been referred to as one of the greatest storytellers for children of the 20th century. His awards for contribution to literature include the 1983 World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement and the British Book Awards Children's Author of the Year in 1990. In 2008, The Times placed Dahl 16th on its list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. Dahl's short stories are known for their unexpected endings, and his children's books for their unsentimental, macabre, often darkly comic mood, featuring villainous adult enemies of the child characters. His books champion the kind-hearted and feature an underlying warm sentiment. Dahl's works for children include James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda the Witch's Fantastic Mr. Fox, The BFG, The Twits and George Marvelous Medicine. His adult works include Tales of the Unexpected Childhood. Roald Dahl was born in 1916 at Villa Marie Fairwater Road in Llandaff, Cardiff, Wales, to Norwegian parents Harold Dahl and Sophie Magdalene Dahl. Dahl's father had emigrated to the UK from Sarpsborg in Norway, and settled in Cardiff in the 1880s. His mother came over and married his father in 1911. Dahl was named after the Norwegian polar explorer Roald Amundsen. His first language was Norwegian, which he spoke at home with his parents and his sisters Astrid, Alfhild and Else. Dahl and his sisters were raised in the Lutheran faith and were baptized at the Norwegian Church Cardiff, where their parents worshipped. In 1920, when Dahl was 3 years old, his 7-year-old sister Astrid died from appendicitis. Weeks later, his father died of pneumonia at the age of 57. With the option of returning to Norway to live with relatives, Dahl's mother decided to remain in Wales because Harold had wished to have their children educated in British schools, which he considered the world's best. Dahl first attended the Cathedral School Llandaff. At the age of 8, he and 4 of his friends were caned by the headmaster after putting a dead mouse in a jar of gobstoppers at the local sweet shop, which was owned by a mean and loathsome old woman called Mrs. Pratchett. This was known among the 5 boys as the Great Mouse Plot of 1924. A favourite sweet among British schoolboys between the 2 world wars, Dahl would later refer to gobstoppers in his literary creation Everlasting Gobstopper. Thereafter he transferred to a boarding school in England, St. Peter's in Weston-super-Mare. Roald's parents had wanted him to be educated at an English public school, and because of a then regular ferry link across the Bristol Channel, this proved to be the nearest. His time at St. Peter's was an unpleasant experience for him. He was very homesick and wrote to his mother every week, but never revealed to her his unhappiness. Only after her death in 1967 did he find out that she had saved every single one of his letters in small bundles held together with green tape. In 2016, to mark the centenary of Dahl's birth, his letters to his mother were abridged and broadcast as BBC Radio 4's Book of the Week. Dahl wrote about his time at St. Peter's in his autobiography, Boy: Tales of Childhood. Repton School. From 1929 he attended Repton School in Derbyshire. Dahl had unhappy experiences of the school. describing an environment of ritual cruelty and acting as personal servants for older boys along with terrible beatings. These violent experiences are described in Donald Sturrock's biography of Dahl. There are echoes of these darker experiences in Dahl's writings and his hatred of cruelty and corporal punishment. According to Boy, Tales of Childhood, a friend named Michael was viciously caned by headmaster Geoffrey Fisher, who later became the Archbishop of Canterbury and went on to crown Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. This caused Dahl to have doubts about religion and even about God. He was never seen as a particularly talented writer in his school years, with one of his English teachers writing in his school report, "I have never met anybody who so persistently writes words meaning the exact opposite of what is intended." Dahl was exceptionally tall, reaching 6 feet in adult life. He played a number of sports, including cricket, football, golf, and was made captain of the squash team. As well as having a passion for literature, he also developed an interest in photography, and often carried a camera with him. During his years at Repton, Cadbury, the chocolate company, would occasionally send boxes of new chocolates to the school to be tested by the pupils. Dahl would dream of inventing a new chocolate bar that would win the praise of Mr. Cadbury himself, and this proved the inspiration for him to write his third children's book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and to include references to chocolate in other children's books. Throughout his childhood and adolescent years, Dahl spent the majority of his summer holidays with his mother's family in Norway, and wrote about many happy memories from those expeditions in Boy, Tales of Childhood, such as when he replaced the tobacco in his half-sister's fiancé's pipe with goat droppings. He only experienced one unhappy memory of his holidays in Norway at around the age of 8, when his adenoids were removed by a doctor. His childhood and first job selling kerosene in Midsummer Norton and surrounding villages in Somerset are subjects in Boy, Tales of Childhood. After school. After finishing his schooling in August 1934, Dahl crossed the Atlantic on the and hiked through Newfoundland with the Public Schools Exploring Society. In July 1934, Dahl joined the Shell Petroleum Company. Following 2 years of training in the United Kingdom, he was transferred first to Mombasa, Kenya, then to Dar es Salaam, Tanganyika, along with the only 2 other Shell employees in the entire territory. He lived in luxury in the Shell house outside Dar es Salaam with a cook and personal servants. While out on assignments supplying oil to customers from across Tanganyika, he encountered black mambas and lions among other wildlife. Fighter ace. In August 1939, as World War II loomed, plans were made to round up the hundreds of Germans in Dar es Salaam. Dahl was made a lieutenant in the King's African Rifles, commanding a platoon of Askaris, indigenous troops serving in the colonial army. In November 1939, Dahl joined the Royal Air Force as an aircraftman with service number 774,022. After a 600 miles car journey from Dar es Salaam to Nairobi, he was accepted for flight training with 16 other men, of whom only 3 others survived the war. With 7 hours and 40 minutes experience in a de Havilland Tiger Moth, he flew solo. Dahl enjoyed watching the wildlife of Kenya during his flights. He continued to advanced flying training in Iraq at Raf Habaniya, 50 miles west of Baghdad. He was commissioned pilot officer on 24 August 1940. Following 6 months training on Hawker Harts, Dahl was made an acting pilot officer. He was assigned to No. 80 Squadron RAF, flying obsolete Gloucester Gladiators, the last biplayer fighter aircraft used by the RAF. Dahl was surprised to find that he would not receive any specialized training in aerial combat or in flying gladiators. On the 19th of September 1940, Dahl was ordered to fly his Gladiator from Abassuir in Egypt onto Almeria to refuel and again to Foça in Libya for a second refueling. From there he would fly to 80 Squadron's forward airstrip 30 miles south of Mersa Matruh. On the final leg, he could not find the airstrip and running low on fuel and with night approaching he was forced to attempt a landing in the desert. The undercarriage hit a boulder and the aircraft crashed, fracturing his skull, smashing his nose, and temporarily blinding him. He managed to drag himself away from the blazing wreckage and passed out. He wrote about the crash in his first published work. Dahl was rescued and taken to a first aid post in Mersa Matruh where he regained consciousness but not his sight, and was then taken by train to the Royal Navy Hospital in Alexandria. There he fell in and out of love with a nurse, Mary Welland. An RAF inquiry into the crash revealed that the location to which he had been told to fly was completely wrong and he had mistakenly been sent instead to the no-man's land between the Allied and Italian forces. In February 1941, Dahl was discharged from hospital and passed fully fit for flying duties. By this time, 80 Squadron had been transferred to the Greek campaign and based at Eleusina near Athens. The squadron was now equipped with Hawker Hurricanes. Dahl flew a replacement Hurricane across the Mediterranean Sea in April 1941. After 7 hours flying Hurricanes. By this stage in the Greek campaign, the RAF had only 18 combat aircraft in Greece, 14 Hurricanes, and 4 Bristol Blenheim light bombers. Dahl saw his first aerial combat on 15 April 1941. While flying alone over the city of Calais, he attacked 6 Junkers Ju-88s that were bombing ships and shot one down. On 16 April in another air battle he shot down another Ju-88. On 20 April 1941, Dahl took part in the Battle of Athens, alongside the highest-scoring British Commonwealth ace of World War II Pat Pattle, and Dahl's friend David Koch. Of 12 Hurricanes involved, 5 were shot down, and 4 of their pilots killed, including Pattle. Greek observers on the ground counted 22 German aircraft downed, but because of the confusion of the aerial engagement, none of the pilots knew which aircraft they had shot down. Dahl described it as an endless blur of enemy fighters whizzing towards me from every side. In May, as the Germans were pressing on Athens, Dahl was evacuated to Egypt. His squadron was reassembled in Haifa. From there Dahl flew sorties every day, for a period of 4 weeks, shooting down a Vichy French Air Force Patez 63 on 8 June, and another Ju-88 on 15 June, but he then began to get severe headaches that caused him to black out. He was invalided home to Britain, though. At this time Dahl was only a pilot officer on probation. In September 1941 he was simultaneously confirmed as a pilot officer and promoted to War Substantive Flying Officer, Diplomat Writer and Intelligence Officer. After being invalided home, Dahl was posted to an RAF training camp in Uxbridge while attempting to recover his health enough to become an instructor. In late March 1942, while in London, he met the Under-Secretary of State for Air Major Harold Balfour at his club. Impressed by his war record and conversational abilities, Balfour appointed Dahl as assistant air attaché at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. Initially resistant, he was finally persuaded by Balfour to accept and took passage on the SS Batory from Glasgow a few days later. He arrived in Halifax on 14 April, after which he took a sleeper train to Montreal. Coming from war-starved Britain, Dahl was amazed by the wealth of food and amenities to be had in North America. Arriving in Washington a week later, Dahl found he liked the atmosphere of the U.S. Capitol. He shared a house at 1610 34th Street, Northwest, in Georgetown with another attaché. After only 10 days in his new posting, Dahl strongly disliked it, feeling he had taken on a most ungodly, unimportant job. As he later said, he was unimpressed by his office in the British Air Mission attached to the embassy. He was also unimpressed by the ambassador Lord Halifax, with whom he sometimes played tennis and whom he described as a courtly English gentleman. Dahl socialized with Texas publisher and oilman Charles E. Marsh at his house at 2136 R Street, Northwest, and the Marsh Country Estate in Virginia. As part of his duties as assistant air attaché, Dahl was to help neutralize the isolationist views many Americans still held by giving pro-British speeches and discussing his war service. The United States had only entered the war the previous December, following the attack on Pearl Harbor. At this time Dahl met the noted novelist C.S. Forester, who was also working to aid the British war effort. Forester worked for the British Information Service and was writing propaganda for the Allied cause, mainly for American consumption. The Saturday Evening Post had asked Forester to write a story based on Dahl's flying experiences. Forester asked Dahl to write down some rough anecdotes so that he could shape them into a story. After Forester read what Dahl had given him, he decided to publish the story exactly as Dahl had written it. The original title of the article was A Piece of Cake, but the title was changed to Shot Down over Libya, to make it sound more dramatic, despite the fact that Dahl had not actually been shot down. It appeared in the 1st of August 1942 issue of the Post. Dahl was promoted to flight lieutenant in August 1942. Later he worked with such other well-known officers as Ian Fleming and David Ogilvy, promoting Britain's interests and message in the US and combating the America First movement. This work introduced Dahl to espionage and the activities of the Canadian spymaster William Stevenson, known by the code name Intrepid. During the war, Dahl supplied intelligence from Washington to Prime Minister Winston Churchill, with Dahl stating, "My job was to try to help Winston to get on with Roosevelt and tell Winston what was in the old boy's mind." Dahl also supplied intelligence to Stevenson and his organization known as British Security Coordination, which was part of MI6. Dahl was once sent back to Britain by British embassy officials, supposedly for misconduct. "I got booted out by the big boys," he said. Stevenson promptly sent him back to Washington, with a promotion to wing commander. Towards the end of the war, Dahl wrote some of the history of the secret organization, and he and Stevenson remained friends for decades after the war. Upon the war's conclusion, Dahl held the rank of a temporary wing commander. Owing to the seriousness of his accident in 1940, he was pronounced unfit for further service and was invalid out of the RAF in August 1946. He left the service with the substantive rank of squadron leader. His record of 5 aerial victories, qualifying him as a flying ace, has been confirmed by post-war research and cross-referenced in Axis records, although it is most likely that he scored more than that. During the 20th of April 1941, when 22 German aircraft were shot down. Post-war life. Dahl married the American actress Patricia Neal on the 2nd of July 1953 at Trinity Church in New York City. Their marriage lasted for 30 years and they had 5 children. On the 5th of December 1960, 4-month-old Theo Dahl was severely injured when his baby carriage was struck by a taxicab in New York City. For a time he suffered from hydrocephalus, and as a result, his father became involved in the development of what became known as the Wade-Dahl valve. a device to alleviate the condition. The valve was a collaboration between Dahl, hydraulic engineer Stanley Wade, and London's Great Ormond Street Hospital neurosurgeon Kenneth Till, and was used successfully on almost 3,000 children around the world. In November 1962, Olivia died of measles encephalitis at age 7. Her death left Dahl limp with despair, and gave him a feeling of guilt that he could not do anything for her. Dahl subsequently became a proponent of immunization and dedicated his 1982 book The BFG to his daughter. After Olivia's death, Dahl lost faith in God and viewed religion as a sham. While mourning her loss, he had sought spiritual guidance from the former Archbishop of Canterbury Geoffrey Fisher, but became dismayed when Fisher told him that although Olivia was in paradise, her beloved dog Rolly would never join her there, with Dahl recalling, "I wanted to ask him how he could be so absolutely sure that other creatures did not get the same special treatment as us. I sat there wondering if this great and famous churchman really knew what he was talking about, and whether he knew anything at all about God or heaven, and if he didn't, then who in the world did?" In 1965, Patricia Neal suffered 3 burst cerebral aneurysms while pregnant with her 5th child, Lucy. Dahl took control of her rehabilitation, and she relearned to talk and walk, and even returned to her acting career. An episode in their lives which was dramatized in the film The Patricia Neal Story, in which the couple were played by Glenda Jackson and Dirk Bogarde. Following a divorce from Neal in 1983, Dahl married Felicity Licky Crossland at Brixton Town Hall, South London. Dahl and Crossland had previously been in a relationship. Licky gave up her job and moved into Gypsy House, Great Missenden in Buckinghamshire, which had been Dahl's home since 1954. In 1983, Dahl reviewed Tony Clifton's God Cried, a picture book about the siege of West Beirut by the Israeli army during the 1982 Lebanon War. Dahl's review stated that the book would make readers violently anti-Israeli, writing, "I am not anti-Semitic. I am anti-Israel." Dahl told a reporter in 1983, "There's a trait in the Jewish character that does provoke animosity. I mean, there is always a reason why anti-anything crops up anywhere. Even a stinker like Hitler didn't just pick on them for no reason." Dahl maintained friendships with a number of Jews, including philosopher Sir Isaiah Berlin, who said, "I thought he might say anything. Could have been pro-Arab or pro-Jew. There was no consistent line. He was a man who followed whims, which meant he would blow up in one direction, so to speak." Amelia Foster, director of the Roald Dahl Museum in Great Missenden, states, "This is again an example of how Dahl refused to take anything seriously, even himself. He was very angry at the Israelis. He had a childish reaction to what was going on in Israel. Dahl wanted to provoke, as he always provoked at dinner. His publisher was a Jew. His agent was a Jew, and he thought nothing but good things of them. He asked me to be his managing director, and I'm Jewish." In the 1986 New Year's Honours list, Dahl was offered an appointment to Officer of the Order of the British Empire, but turned it down, reportedly because he wanted a knighthood so that his wife would be Lady Dahl. In 2012, Dahl featured in the list of the New Elizabethans to mark the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. A panel of 7 academics, journalists, and historians named Dahl among the group of people in the UK whose actions during the reign of Elizabeth II have had a significant impact on lives in these islands, and given the age its character. Death and legacy. Roald Dahl died on 23 November 1990 at the age of 74 of a rare cancer of the blood, myelodysplastic syndrome, in Oxford, and was buried in the cemetery at St. Peter and St. Paul's Church in Great Missenden, Buckinghamshire, England. According to his granddaughter, the family gave him a sort of Viking funeral. He was buried with his snooker cues, some very good burgundy chocolates, HB pencils and a power saw. Today children continue to leave toys and flowers by his grave. In November 1996, the Roald Dahl Children's Gallery was opened at the Buckinghamshire County Museum in nearby Aylesbury. The main belt asteroid 6223 Dahl, discovered by Czech astronomer Antonin Markaios, was named in his memory in 1996. In 2002, one of Cardiff Bay's modern landmarks, the Oval Basin Plaza, was renamed Roald Dahl Plass. Plass is Norwegian for place or square, alluding to the writer's Norwegian roots. There have also been calls from the public for a permanent statue of him to be erected in Cardiff. In 2016, the city celebrated the centenary of Dahl's birth in Llandaff. Welsh arts organisations, including National Theatre Wales, Wales Millennium Centre and Literature Wales, came together for a series of events titled Roald Dahl 100, including a Cardiff-wide City of the Unexpected, which marked his legacy. Dahl's charitable commitments in the fields of neurology, hematology, and literacy during his life have been continued by his widow since his death. Through Roald Dahl's marvelous children's charity, formerly known as the Roald Dahl Foundation, the charity provides care and support to seriously ill children and young people throughout the UK. In June 2005, the Roald Dahl Museum and Story Centre in the author's home village, Great Missenden, was officially opened by Cherie Blair, wife of UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, to celebrate the work of Roald Dahl and advance his work in literacy education. Over 50,000 visitors from abroad, mainly from Australia, Japan, the United States and Germany, travel to the Village Museum every year. In 2008, the UK Charity Book Trust and Children's Laureate Michael Rosen inaugurated the Roald Dahl Funny Prize, an annual award to authors of humorous children's fiction. On the 14th of September 2009, the first blue plaque in his honour was unveiled in Llandaff. Rather than commemorating his place of birth, however, the plaque was erected on the wall of the former sweet shop that features in the first part of his autobiography, Boy. It was unveiled by his widow Felicity and son Theo. The anniversary of Dahl's birthday on the 13th of September is celebrated as Roald Dahl Day in Africa, the United Kingdom and Latin America. In honor of Dahl, the Royal Gibraltar Post Office issued a set of 4 stamps in 2010 featuring Quentin Blake's original illustrations for 4 of the children's books written by Dahl during his long career: the BFG, the Twits, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Matilda. A set of 6 stamps was issued by Royal Mail in 2012 featuring Blake's illustrations for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Twits, the Witches, Matilda, Fantastic Mr. Fox and James and the Giant Peach. Dahl's influence has extended beyond literary figures. For instance, film director Tim Burton recalled from childhood the second layer, after Dr. Seuss, of connecting to a writer who gets the idea of the modern fable and the mixture of light and darkness and not speaking down to kids, and the kind of politically incorrect humor that kids get. I've always liked that, and it's shaped everything I've felt that I've done. Steven Spielberg read the BFG to his children when they were young, stating the book celebrates the fact that it's okay to be different as well as to have an active imagination. It's very important that we preserve the tradition of allowing young children to run free with their imaginations, and magic and imagination are the same thing. Actress Scarlett Johansson named Fantastic Mr. Fox one of the 5 books that made a difference to her, regarded as one of the greatest storytellers for children of the 20th century. Dahl was named by The Times one of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. He ranks amongst the world's best-selling fiction authors, with sales estimated at over 250 million. And his books have been published in almost 60 languages. In 2003, 4 books by Dahl, led by Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at number 35, ranked among the top 100 in the Big Read, a survey of the British public by the BBC to determine the nation's best-loved novel of all time. In surveys of UK teachers, parents and students, Dahl is frequently ranked the best children's writer. In a 2006 list for the Royal Society of Literature, Harry Potter creator J.K. Rowling named Charlie and the Chocolate Factory one of her top 10 books every child should read. In 2012, Matilda was ranked number 30 among all-time best children's novels in a survey published by School Library Journal, a monthly with primarily U.S. audience. The top 100 included 4 books by Dahl, more than any other writer: Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Witches, and the BFG. In 2012, Dahl was among the British cultural icons selected by artist Sir Peter Blake to appear in a new version of his most famous artwork, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover, to celebrate the British cultural figures of his life he most admires. In a 2017 UK poll of the greatest authors, songwriters, artists and photographers, Dahl was named the greatest storyteller of all time, ranking ahead of Dickens, Shakespeare, Rowling, and Spielberg. Writing. Dahl's first published work, inspired by a meeting with C.S. Forester, was A Piece of Cake on 1 August 1942. The story about his wartime adventures was bought by the Saturday Evening Post for $1,000 and published under the title Shot Down Over Libya. His first children's book was The Gremlins, published in 1943, about mischievous little creatures that were part of Royal Air Force folklore. The RAF pilots blamed the gremlins for all the problems with the aircraft. While at the British Embassy in Washington, Dahl sent a copy to the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who read it to her grandchildren, and the book was commissioned by Walt Disney for a film that was never made. Dahl went on to create some of the best-loved children's stories of the 20th century, such as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, The Witches, Fantastic Mr. Fox, The BFG, The Twits and George Marvelous Medicine. Dahl also had a successful parallel career as the writer of macabre adult short stories, usually with a dark sense of humor and a surprise ending. The Mystery Writers of America presented Dahl with 3 Edgar Awards for his work, and many were originally written for American magazines such as Collier's Ladies' Home Journal, Harper's Playboy and The New Yorker. Works such as Kiss Kiss subsequently collected Dahl's stories into anthologies, gaining worldwide acclaim. Dahl wrote more than 60 short stories. They have appeared in numerous collections, some only being published in book form after his death. His 3 Edgar Awards were given for, in 1954, the collection Someone Like You, in 1959, the story The Landlady, and in 1980 the episode of Tales of the Unexpected based on Skin. One of his more famous adult stories, The Smoker, also known as Man from the South, was filmed twice as both 1960 and 1985 episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and also adapted into Quentin Tarantino's segment of the 1995 film 4 Rooms. This oft-anthologized classic concerns a man in Jamaica who wages with visitors in an attempt to claim the fingers from their hands. The 1960 Hitchcock version stars Steve McQueen and Peter Lorre. Dahl acquired a traditional Romantical gypsy wagon in the 1960s, and the family used it as a playhouse for his children at home in Great Missenden, Buckinghamshire. He later used the Vado as a writing room where he wrote Annie the Champion of the World in 1975. Dahl incorporated a gypsy wagon into the main plot of the book, where the young English boy Danny and his father William live in a gypsy caravan. His short story collection Tales of the Unexpected was adapted to a successful TV series of the same name, beginning with Man from the South. When the stock of Dahl's own original stories was exhausted, the series continued by adapting stories by authors that were written in Dahl's style, including the writers John Collier and Stanley Ellen. Some of his short stories are supposed to be extracts from the diary of his uncle Oswald, a rich gentleman whose sexual exploits form the subject of these stories. In his novel My Uncle Oswald, the uncle engages a temptress to seduce 20th-century geniuses and royalty with a love potion secretly added to chocolate truffles made by Dahl's favorite chocolate shop, Prestat of Piccadilly, London. Memories with Food at Gypsy House, written with his wife Felicity and published posthumously in 1991, was a mixture of recipes, family reminiscences, and Dahl's musings on favorite subjects such as chocolate, onions, and claret. Children's fiction. Dahl's children's works are usually told from the point of view of a child. They typically involve adult villains who hate and mistreat children, and feature at least one good adult to counteract the villain. These stock characters are possibly a reference to the abuse that Dahl stated that he experienced in the boarding schools he attended. Dahl's books see the triumph of the child. Children's book critic Amanda Craig said, "He was unequivocal that it is the good, young and kind who triumph over the old, greedy and the wicked." While his whimsical fantasy stories feature an underlying warm sentiment, they usually contain a lot of darkly comic and grotesque scenarios, including gruesome violence. The Witches' Georges' Marvelous Medicine and Matilda are examples of this formula. The BFG follows it in a more analogous way, with the good giant representing the good adult archetype and the other giants being the bad adults. This formula is also somewhat evident in Dahl's film script for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Class-conscious themes also surface in works such as Fantastic Mr. Fox and Danny, the Champion of the World, where the unpleasant wealthy neighbors are outwitted. Dahl also features in his books characters who are very fat, usually children. Augustus Gloop, Bruce Bogtrotter and Bruno Jenkins are a few of these characters, although an enormous woman named Aunt Sponge is featured in James and the Giant Peach, and the nasty farmer Bogus in Fantastic Mr. Fox is an enormously fat character. All of these characters are either villains or simply unpleasant gluttons. They are usually punished for this. Augustus Gloop drinks from Willy Wonka's chocolate river, disregarding the adults who tell him not to, and falls in getting sucked up a pipe and nearly being turned into fudge. In Matilda, Bruce Bogtrotter steals cake from the evil headmistress Miss Trunchbull and is forced to eat a gigantic chocolate cake in front of the school. Featured in The Witches, Bruno Jenkins is lured by the witches into their convention with the promise of chocolate before they turn him into a mouse. Aunt Sponge is flattened by a giant peach Dahl's mother used to tell you him and his sisters tales about trolls and other mythical Norwegian creatures. And some of his children's books contain references or elements inspired by these stories, such as the giants in the BFG, the Fox family in Fantastic Mr. Fox, and the trolls in the Min Pins. Receiving the 1983 World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement, Dahl encouraged his children and his readers to let their imagination run free. His daughter Lucy stated, "His spirit was so large and so big, he taught us to believe in magic." Dahl was also famous for his inventive, playful use of language, which was a key element to his writing. He would invent new words by scribbling down his words before swapping letters around and adopting spoonerisms and malapropisms. The lexicographer Dr. Susan Rennie stated that Dahl built his new words on familiar sounds, adding, in 2016 marking the centenary of Dahl's birth, Rennie compiled the Oxford Roald Dahl Dictionary, which includes many of his invented words and their meaning. Rennie commented that some of Dahl's words have already escaped his world. For example, scrumdiddlyumptious, food that is utterly delicious. In his poetry, Dahl gives a humorous reinterpretation of well-known nursery rhymes and fairy tales, providing surprise endings in place of the traditional happily ever after. Dahl's collection of poems Revolting Rhymes is recorded in audiobook form and narrated by actor Alan Cumming. Screenplays. For a brief period in the 1960s, Dahl wrote screenplays to the James Bond film You Only Live Twice and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang were adaptations of novels by Ian Fleming. Dahl also began adapting his own novel Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which was completed and rewritten by David Seltzer after Dahl failed to meet deadlines, and produced as the film Willy Wonka, saying he was disappointed because he thought it placed too much emphasis on Willy Wonka and not enough on Charlie. He was also infuriated by the deviations in the plot devised by David Seltzer in his draft of the screenplay. This resulted in his refusal for any more versions of the book to be made in his lifetime, as well as an adaptation for the sequel Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Influences. A major part of Dahl's literary influences stemmed from his childhood. In his younger days, he was an avid reader, especially awed by fantastic tales of heroism and triumph. Amongst his favorite authors were Rudyard Kipling, Charles Dickens, William Makepeace Thackeray, and Frederick Marryat, and their works went on to make a lasting mark on his life and writing. Finding too many distractions in his house, Dahl remembered the poet Dylan Thomas had found a peaceful shed to write in close to home. Dahl travelled to visit Thomas' hut in Carmarthenshire, Wales in the 1950s and, after taking a look inside, decided to make a replica of it to write in. Dahl was also a huge fan of ghost stories and claimed that Trolls by Jonas Lie was one of the finest ghost stories ever written. While he was still a youngster, his mother Sophie Dahl would relate traditional Norwegian myths and legends from her native homeland to Dahl and his sisters. Dahl always maintained that his mother and her stories had a strong influence on his writing. In one interview he mentioned, "She was a great teller of tales. Her memory was prodigious and nothing that ever happened to her in her life was forgotten." When Dahl started writing and publishing his famous books for children, he created a grandmother character in The Witches, and later stated that she was based directly on his own mother as a tribute. Television. In 1961, Dahl hosted and wrote for a science fiction and horror television anthology series called Way Out, which preceded the Twilight Zone series on the CBS network for 14 episodes from March to July. One of the last dramatic network shows shot in New York City, the entire series is available for viewing at the Paley Center for Media in New York City and Los Angeles. He also wrote for the satirical BBC comedy program That Was the Week That Was, which was hosted by David Frost. The British television series Tales of the Unexpected originally aired on ITV between 1979 and 1988. The series was released to tie in with Dahl's short story anthology of the same name, which had introduced readers to many motifs that were common in his writing. The series was an anthology of different tales initially based on Dahl's short stories. The stories were sometimes sinister, sometimes wryly comedic, and usually had a twist ending. Dahl introduced on camera all the episodes of the first two series, which bore the full title Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?